Welcome back to a very special episode of the Thoughtful Thursday podcast. We have some new friends here today, and I'm really excited to share them with you because they're people that I really enjoy hanging out with. As always, you know, the wonderful, the awesome Cammie Short. To my left here, I have the adventurous, the spirited, the talkative Rhonda Owens. Thanks for being here today. And then on my right, I have Miss Niki Huard, who is, sorry, Dave and Karen, my favorite neighbor that I have. And, you know, we're barely neighbors. I mean, our backyards touch. I'd count it, though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Nikki and ours backyard is a golfing green. It is a baseball diamond. And our kids have a lot of fun.
We do. It is a haven for all things fun.
And we love it.
Oh, we do too. It's really interesting. The other day I was looking out my kitchen window and there was just sticks somehow in a big arch.
Yes.
And the girls were, I don't know what they were making, but
making
it looked
some
amazing.
Sort of teepee or something.
Yeah, it looked amazing, whatever it was.
Yes, there's always...
Was an axe involved?
No. We will...
There's another story.
Yeah, maybe at the end of the podcast, we have a fun story to share about our children. My child. So we'll get there.
Don't put this on Nikki. Right.
Oh, it has nothing to do with Nikki. It is 100% my child.
Oh, my goodness.
My circus and my monkeys.
Yeah, I have them too.
In this podcast episode today, we are talking about thinking creatively about reaching out into our community and into our backyard with the good news of Jesus and the gospel and hope. And so that's really our theme today. And I'm really excited to share with you some awesome stuff that God is doing that's happening in our very own backyard here in Bryan and Williams County area. And I don't want to give it away yet, but we will get to it after a little bit of conversation. But both Nikki and Rhonda are involved in it, and I am just so excited for what this could mean for our community and for our local churches and for the gospel kind of being pushed forward here in our very own backyard. So I want to just start with this idea and thought and just get you guys' feedback. I think that historically, at least here in the American church, we expect people to just kind of show up to church on Sunday, and that this is where they're going to hear about God, right? Is just kind of showing up to church, or maybe we throw out an invite every once in a while. But my question is, what does it look like to be intentional with those outside of the four walls of our church buildings, right? What does it look like to be intentional about people in our very own backyard?
Which is funny that we started this by talking about our backyards.
I know, right?
That worked out really well.
Nice. Let's see what you did there.
Yeah.
So I think it's just important to define what the church is. So many times we think it's a building that you go to, and nowhere in the gospel does it refer to the church in that way. So the people, the body of Christ, the members of the church, so to speak, like we are the church. And so I think that wherever a believer goes, that is where the church is. So it can be in the line at Walmart, or, waiting for your kids at swim practice, or however that looks like. I get to bring the church wherever I'm going, but I have to be intentional about that because, usually if I'm standing in the Walmart checkout line, I'm like scrolling on my phone and I'm not even looking around at the people around me, that I can be thinking, wow, I can just say, hey, looks like you're having a rough day, or whatever, just to start that conversation. So it definitely takes being intentional and just realizing this is not something that people come to. We go to. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
I think to piggyback off of that, we in the American church often think not of ourselves as believers, but as our ministers. Like, we go to church and those are our pastors at our church, and the pastors are the ones who are sharing the gospel with maybe people we intentionally invite to church. But again, scripture doesn't talk about, like, our pastors are the only people who are supposed to share the gospel and we need to bring people to our pastors. Instead, we are, all of us who are believers, we are supposed to, as the church, go out and be spreading the gospel in that way. So I think, I just think we need to be really intentional about not relying on professional pastors to be taking the gospel into the world.
Yeah, and I think I talked about this a little bit a couple episodes ago, I believe. But I usually politely refuse when I'm at a party or a situation when I'm asked to pray. I get asked to pray a lot, believe it or not, as a pastor. And most of the time I politely and kindly like, you know what, I'm okay. And actually I bet that person would do it. And it obviously depends on the situation I'm in and who I'm talking to and all of that. But I spent a lot of family get-togethers praying because I went to Bible school. Well, you went to Bible school, so why don't you pray? And I'm like, no, I'm refusing. I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore.
Do you mean like VBS? Like I went to VBS, vacation Bible school.
I could use a vacation Bible school. That sounds awesome.
That's an important point. We actually love inviting our children to pray at family gatherings because it gets them used to speaking in front of people, praying out loud.
Yep.
And I never thought about that. But yeah, I bet you do get asked all the time because, he's closer to the church. He's closer
for sure.
to God.
Yeah.
We will have him pray, But really, we have to all take ownership in that. And one of... I start this. If my kids were listening right now, they would roll their eyes because I say this all the time. But one of my favorite parts of the Bible is when Jesus is having a conversation with Peter and he says, "Do you love me?" He's like, "Yes, of course, I love you." And he said, "Then feed my sheep." And so I just always remember that. And I always hear that in the back of my mind, like, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. And that gives me ownership in my role as a Christian. And I think we're living in a time when it's really more acceptable to be your authentic selves. And I think we crave seeing authenticity and it's relatable and we need that. But I think too often as Christians, we tend to stifle that because we're afraid of what people will think of us, or we're afraid of saying what they don't want to hear, where we don't want to come across the wrong way. But I think it's really, really important that as Christians, we be our authentic selves. So if I see God moving in a situation, I don't really care who my audience is. I'm going to tell them, like, God was really working in this situation because, XYZ happened. And so I don't let my faith waver. I present myself as authentically as I can. I haven't always. It's something I had to learn to do. But I think it's important that we come across authentically as followers of Christ and not tiptoe around things. Jesus never tiptoed around things. Mm-hmm. He was very frank about things. So I think that we shouldn't be afraid to have those conversations, even with random strangers.
Sure.
So God presents those moments, and then it's up to us to act on them.
Yeah, and I think that you'd be hard pressed to find a pastor, a minister, a priest, a leader of the church that wouldn't get really excited about those who attend to take a next step in their faith of sharing it, of being the church, and that's something that I think that as a pastor, like, that's my heart for people, is that they take ownership of their faith. And let me just throw this question out there, and maybe it's from your own experience or talking with people or just kind of what you've seen or observed throughout your lives. What is it, and maybe you've kind of partly answered it already, Niki, but what is it that keeps us from, taking that step versus maybe just a simple invite to church, which I think is still a really valuable, valid thing. The opposite is not inviting people to church, which I don't think is a great option. But what keeps people from taking that step and owning their faith and seeing themselves as the church and, stepping out? Any thoughts, you ladies?
I think it's not realizing that that's what our mission is. Mm. That is the mission that Jesus gave us.
Yeah.
It's not to build our career or all the other things, which are great that he allows us to do those things as well. But the mission and his will for our life is to make disciples and share the gospel.
Yeah.
So,
And like the end. The end.
Period.
But I think not only we might not know that is what our mission is,
Yeah.
but also maybe we come to know that that's what our mission is, but then we feel ill-equipped to do it because we, and Cammie and I have talked a lot about this, just the whole concept of discipleship is sort of lost in our culture right now because we seek comfort, and discipleship is uncomfortable. It is learning things that are hard. It's learning about the things in the Bible that, are difficult to read about. Like, we're so used to hearing the happy, fun things about the Bible, like, oh, yay, Noah's Ark, and let's make cute little Noah's Ark pictures on our kids' wall. When in reality, like, there were probably dead people floating, in the 40
bodies.
days after. I mean, it was, so anyway, I could go on and on about lots of different scenes that we just sort of gloss over in Scripture, and we just don't know the Word. And so because we don't know the Word, we perhaps don't have a very strong grasp of what the gospel really is. So then if we ourselves are not disciples, how then can we go out and make disciples? So I think first we need to know, second we need to be equipped, and we need, and that is, we need to equip ourselves also, and not just entirely rely again on our professional pastors to do that, our professional ministering individuals. The onus is on us, and we, quite frankly, have failed, myself included. I'm in my 50s, and like I feel like I've only just truly started becoming a disciple within probably the last 10 or 15 years. So how many years were wasted?
Yeah, and I one quote that, well, Pat Schwank, who was a lead pastor at New Hope number of years ago, but was my youth pastor in high school, one of the pieces of advice that he gave me, like within a couple weeks of him hiring me as the youth pastor, was, and I might have even asked him, like, do you have any advice for me as a pastor, And he said, I spent too many years beating the flock instead of shepherding the flock. And I think for me, I really do tend towards frustration and disappointment and anger and just like, why don't people look like the way I feel like they should look like or do the things that I feel like they should be doing? And I think even discipleship is a great example. I can get really frustrated that, X, Y, or Z isn't happening. And then for me, I would not say that I was necessarily intentionally discipled in my life. In fact, it wasn't until too long ago where I intentionally sought that out, and it being a process of, being shown how to do some things spiritually, be able to be given the tools and the keys to be able to do the things with someone looking over my shoulder in a helping way, and correcting me when I need to be corrected, and encouraging me when I need to be encouraged. And I think even as we talk about this topic, I can be like, yeah, why aren't more people going out and doing this? And then I'm like, they haven't been shown in a personal, individual, meaningful way how to. And, I don't, start working on my toilet when it breaks. I call someone that knows what they're doing, right? And so I think it's, what does it look like to disciple? And maybe if you're outside the church and you don't know that word real well, it's like an apprenticeship, essentially. Mm-hmm. It's, hey, let me bring you alongside, and I'm going to show you how to do all the things. And my point is, how do we help people do that? What does that look like, instead of my initial reaction being judgment and frustration and like, let's get this thing going. Yeah. I don't know. That was just maybe super long rabbit trail there. Sorry.
So many good points though to talk about. We also, that's basically why grace exists, right? Because we do fail, and that's okay. I think, you guys are touching on so many things that, yes, we have to spend time in the Word ourselves in order to be able to teach others or to help others. We also have to spend a lot of time in prayer, and in such a way that prayer becomes like second nature, like comfort, like not formal, but like, you know, like a relationship should be. And prayer is an important piece of that. And then, you know, and then we have to act on it also. So it all goes together. And yeah, we stumble and fail all the time. But it's not our ministry. It's not Nik's ministry. It's not Rhonda's or Cammie's. It's God's ministry. And so I always just take the pressure off myself, and then I don't feel like I'm going to fail because it's not me.
Yeah.
God's creating moments, and I pray all the time because I need this. Like, Lord, take a hold of my tongue and use your words, not mine, because I don't trust myself.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point that you bring up, because we don't want people to think that because I don't know the Bible from beginning to end, I therefore cannot speak about it yet. And that's so not the case, because you talked about being authentic. And so, you know, I just think of parents so many times, just because I work in kids ministry. So it might be tempting for the parent to think, I have to take my kid to, you know, church on Sunday morning so that they can learn about God. But they have the most influence in their child's life. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if they don't know it all. None of us do, and we never will. We're always going to learn more, but it's okay for them to be authentic and live their faith out so their child can see that and see when they mess up, mm-hmm. own it. Oh, we can pray and we can ask for forgiveness and all those things. I don't know. So it's all of that.
Yeah.
It's yes and.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
well, and having our kids see us learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, not only are we don't know it all, but they can see that we are trying to mm-hmm. learn. And like you said, it's a lifelong, we'll never know it all. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the thing. I was thinking, as you guys were talking, Romans 1:16, I think it is, talks about how we are not ashamed of the gospel. And I do think truly believers aren't ashamed of the gospel. Like, believers I know aren't ashamed of the gospel, but they forget that the power really is in the gospel, which is what Romans 1:16 is. So the power isn't in me. It's not in you. It's truly in the gospel that we share. Mm-hmm. And I've learned really hard lessons over the last probably 5 or 6 years about how, like, we've set out to do, my husband and I set out to do, like, we're going to do this great big thing for God. And God was like, oh, that's really cute. But I have a lot of work to do in you. And also, I don't need you. Like, God totally doesn't need us. He graciously and delightfully allows us to come alongside him in the ministry that he has for us. And so we don't need to stress out mm-hmm. about, like,
exactly.
Yeah, we don't need to stress out about like knowing all the things. And we just need to be progressing forward in the faith as much as we can. And while we're doing it, stumbling forward many times, and taking 2 steps back and stumbling forward, hopefully, just understanding that God is where the power is. The gospel is the power, and it's not our own efforts.
Absolutely. When you said stumbling forward, I thought of myself tripping upstairs because I'm still making it up, but it's a little bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And what a loving, kind, and generous thing to do. Absolutely. I mean, from God's perspective, I mean, it's like Tom Brady saying, hey, come on in here to the Super Bowl and I'm going to let you throw some for me. It's like, why would you do that? That is the worst thing. You know, when we compare ourselves and our capabilities and our talents and our giftings to the person of God, we have nothing to offer.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And yet he says, like, no, like, I will allow you not just to be a part of this, but I'm going to give you things that, you know, maybe are specifically for you that I've designed. You know, like Scripture says, you know, I prepared good works for you, you know, and what a kind, generous, and loving thing to do to a very inept people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what we learn is that as we step out in faith to do the hard things that he's asked us to do the things that make us feel uncomfortable, he does show up all the time.
Absolutely.
And so as he shows up, and like as Niki said, as we authentically and organically just tell people like, wow, I just did this, and like it totally wasn't me, it was totally God. And like we just build a legacy in our own lives and in people who are watching us. We build a legacy of how God just constantly is present with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if you can think of stories or examples of how you have shared Jesus in meaningful or creative ways with just in your workplace or in your neighborhood or in your home or school, whatever that looks like. I think of Jesus' example of teaching with parables all the time. And, if he's walking through the wheat field, he's using, using the wheat, just anything that was around him, that's what he used. And so I just love that picture that he gave us. But how have you been able to incorporate that in your life? I know, Niki, you shared a neat story with me beforehand. So,
yeah, actually, it was a couple years ago. The neighbor that lived across the street from us, she would often come out on her porch when the kids would ride their bikes on the sidewalk, and we would just go up and down our little block. So we would keep going by her house, and I didn't see her for a while. And then she was outside again, and she had an oxygen tank. And I asked her I said, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And she said, I'm not doing so good. I've had pneumonia, struggling to shake it. I've been in the hospital. And I said, can I pray over you? And she said, sure. And I put my arm or my hand on her arm, and I just prayed over her in that moment. And when I opened my eyes, she was crying. And she said to me, no one's ever done that for me before. And I was like, really? Because what you have to know is that she grew up and was very involved in her church her whole life. And there were always cars at her house of people visiting from her church, bringing her food and taking care of her. And so it surprised me for her to say, no one's ever prayed over me before. And that small moment, it was small for me. It felt like sometimes we look at prayer as like the only thing I have to offer.
The last resort.
But really it should be the biggest thing that we offer. And so it surprised me that nobody thought to just put their hand on her and pray over her. And so that was just literally a casual evening of my kids riding their bike. And, I've been at work before, and actually you talked about, or Rhonda, you talked about Noah's Ark and rainbows, and then we get into dead people floating. And
Sorry.
That's okay.
That's where I go.
Because I think the stereotype of Christianity are the sunshine and rainbow kind of stories, or fire and brimstone judgmental type of stories. And I love telling people, I kind of like the shock value it gave even my own kids as they got older. And I was like, the Sunday school story of David and Goliath. Let me tell you what is actually in the Bible.
Yeah, those chapters that follow are
Right?
awesome.
Like here's the adult version of the story. And they thought they were learning some big secret thing, and they were like, really? So sometimes we forget that a lot of the general population, a lot of their relationship with the Bible involves those Sunday school stories. And actually there's a lot more to them. That's a great place to start. I always tell people, if you are interested in Christianity, you should go teach preschool Sunday school for a while, because you learn all of the stories and then you can dig into them a little bit deeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Teachers tell me all the time that they learn so much because they're teaching classes. They're teaching kids, elementary kids, and for you it was preschool. And I'm like, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of it. Yeah. That's discipleship.
Yeah. I've always wanted, this is a total aside, but I've always wanted like a serious director to come in and, do a full length, feature length movie on like a David and Goliath, where it's like the R-rated version, where they just like, hey, we're going to take the story and we're going to make the story. We're going to take the verses and we're going to make it. I think it'd be a blast. I think a lot more guys would get into the Bible.
Or maybe the guys would not get into that with the foreskin situation.
Oh, right.
Yeah, depending on which.
Sorry, did I say that?
I'm not. We don't have to do the whole Bible. We can pick and choose some stories,
Sorry, I'm sorry. You probably have to edit that out.
I mean,
I do know my 6-year-old son would find
There's so many things to say.
I know, I'm so sorry.
I think my 6-year-old son would find the real story of David a lot more incredible than the Sunday school version.
Yeah.
I think he would like that, but
Well, and I think with all of these things, the ultimate message is always the gospel. Like what do they say? The meta narrative or the overarching story is always coming back to God's plan for our salvation, the fact that we need him. Because it's so easy to look at these stories and be like, oh, look at David and Goliath, and he was courageous. I want to be courageous like David. Well, there's so much more. Like God was there and he was rescuing David. Why was he rescuing David? Because he needed to rescue the line of David, so that Christ could eventually come out of it, so that he could come and save us. So like we need to not stop short either in terms of just making it be about like, oh, I want to be courageous, or I want to be a good friend, or I want to be a good wife or whatever. And just always again, coming back to Romans 1:16, like there is power in the gospel. And if we let our efforts fall short of bringing it back around to the gospel, then I think, and that's simple, right? Like we say, think creatively, like really, I think it's okay to just be simple and say like, yeah, here's the story of David and Goliath. Oh, and here's the whole story of David and Goliath, all those other terrible, horrible, awful things included, but also here's why, and lead it back to the gospel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to touch on your question that you were asking, Cammie, and I think that Niki does a good job of this, and I've seen this in action just in her life and interacting with other people, is just taking advantage of opportunities that God puts in front of you, big or small. I had just one of those moments this past weekend. Minda, my wife, had a gig at a local place, JJ Wins, and so I went there and ate dinner and hung out with some people, and she got done. And I'm her roadie, so I always pack everything up so she can rest after playing straight for 3 hours. And I'm cleaning up, and I noticed that there's this guy at the bar, and he's just kind of like watching me. I was like, he's just watching me, seeing how I break down stuff or whatever. And,
He likes my hair.
yeah, I was having a good hair day. And didn't think anything of it. And then I'm kind of getting done, and I noticed he's still watching me, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go and I'm going to say something to this guy. Sometimes at some of Minda's gigs, we get some weirdos. This guy did not give me that vibe, but I'm like, I'm just going to go talk to him. And I walked up to him, and he started the conversation. He was like, are you her husband? And I was like, yeah, I am. And he's like, she's incredible, blah, blah, blah. So it turns out I stood there at the bar and talked to this guy for probably 20 or 30 minutes, and he lives in D.C., was on his way to Wyoming, and had just stopped at JJ Wins because there's also a hotel attached to it, just stopped there for the night. And just so happened to be at JJ Wins on this night where Minda's playing, where I'm going to be at. And he shared, he's driving through because his mom of 98 years had just passed away. Who was 98 years old, had just passed away. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And I shared, just this past November, my dad passed away. I was like, man, my heart really goes out to you. I don't know how you're feeling, but I know how I feel, and it stinks. And it was just all of these things that we were talking about was like just all these really crazy connections.
that's awesome.
And I did the same thing. I was just like, because he was very emotional, and he was, I think in his 60s. I just said, hey, would you mind if I prayed with you? Obviously your mom meant a lot to you, and there's a really big week you got coming up, and just those little opportunities that God puts in front of you, I think makes a big difference when you see those. And just like you were saying earlier, Cammie, when I'm at JJ Wins, I'm bringing the church there. When I'm going to Walmart, I'm bringing the church there. And you just never know the things that God is arranging and orchestrating that you may miss out on if you're not looking for it.
Yeah, and to be bold enough to step forward into that situation, to just step into that situation and in that moment, and again, be your authentic self and share who God has made you in those kinds of moments, and not be afraid to do that. And you had nothing to lose. If he didn't like what you had to say, then he never has to see you again, right? But I love not only those moments that God creates, the spaces in time that he creates for them to happen, and I love hearing about people in those moments too. That's just awesome. That's God. That's you. You're feeding his sheep, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And so yeah, we don't just have to think of church as that place we go on Sundays or maybe even Wednesdays. But the church is really inside of us, and we need to show people that. So
absolutely. And Cammie, earlier you brought up Matthew 28 and the Great Commission. And that's really what we're all called to, right? That's all of our mission from God. That is the mission of the church, not a building or necessarily a local gathering, but that is every single believer's challenge, call. The flag they're supposed to hold up is to, go into all nations, make disciples, baptize them, and teach them, what I've taught you. And so I think as we move forward in this conversation, I'm really excited to talk about one really unique way that's going to be happening here in the future in our own backyard of Bryan. And so Niki and Rhonda are both a part of a board that has formed for an organization called Lifewise. And I don't want to take away any of you guys' excitement and steam. So let me just ask, what is Lifewise? Will you talk about what it is and break it down for us?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we are both definitely very excited about this. As Rhonda said earlier, when you do work for the kingdom of God, it doesn't have to be something just big and huge and almighty. And it also doesn't have to be something distant and far away. It can be right in your backyard, and it doesn't have to be complicated either. So Lifewise Academy is a nonprofit organization, and it actually was founded in Van Wert, Ohio, which is Bryan's backyard, practically, right? Not that far away. And that was back in 2018. And then in 2019, they launched their first academies. So one of the biggest things, and when I first learned about this, I was like, well, how can this even exist? So what you'd have to know is Lifewise Academy is character-based teaching that's biblically based, and it happens during public school hours. And so a lot of people, including myself, are like, but is that allowed? Are the feds coming to shut us down?
Separation of church and state.
Yes,
what's going on?
And it is actually completely legal. So back in 1952, the Supreme Court passed this released time for religious instruction. So it's completely permissible. It just cannot happen on school grounds. And you have to have parents' permission, and but it can happen during school hours. So the curriculum is really cool because it is, like I said, it's character based. So they're talking about obedience and responsibility, but they actually also work through the Bible over a 5-year span of time, starting in Genesis and ending in Revelation. So they cover a lot of ground over 5 years of. It's for 1st through 5th grade, so 5 years of elementary education. So I started hearing some buzz about this in nearby communities, and I first learned about it when it came to Defiance, which is also our backyard. Yep. And a friend of mine is the teacher of this program there, and I was like, oh, she'd be so great at that. And so the more I learned about it, the more I talked to parents who have their schools in that, or their kids in that school system, and they were like, we love this. Our kids love it. And I'm like, this is so great. We need to get this in Bryan. And then last fall, a friend of mine forwarded me a link where I could sign up for more information and stay in contact and in the loop on it. And so I later learned that Lifewise Academy is coming to Bryan, and my kids will get to participate in it, and it's actually really, really exciting. So, so it's perfectly legal. because of that Supreme Court ruling back in 1952, which is incredible. So that was in 1952, and it wasn't until 2018 that somebody in this area, at least, was like, hey, we are not taking advantage of this. So,
well, I do think it's really cool that Van Wert was actually doing released time religious instruction. It wasn't called Lifewise Academy, but they paired with another nonprofit organization called Stand for Truth. And they were like, there's something here. I think we can help other communities do this as well. And so that's how Lifewise was birthed out of that. And what I love about the Bible-based character education is kind of like what I was saying earlier, the curriculum that they use always comes back around to the gospel, because it's really easy to just be like, oh, let's look at the story of David and let's see it as a story of courage or just as a story of friendship, like between David and Jonathan. But they do work from the beginning, Genesis, all the way. By the end of the year, they will have gone all the way through to the end to Revelation. But every single lesson, every single week circles back around to the gospel and to Christ in some way. So literally the kids are always getting, the gospel and how we need Jesus.
That is awesome. Now, I know that some other local communities have started this around us. What schools are doing these, and have they had success in their schools with this program?
Yeah, I know as of this year, there are over 24 schools that have this curriculum active and going in their school districts. And there are several others. I don't know if you know the number, Rhonda, that are in the process of implementing it, as are we.
I don't know the number, but I know that it's increasing greatly, which is kind of amazing since this is just 2022. So in less than 4 years, we have many, many school systems doing that. I know that in Defiance, there are over 800 students who are a part of it. And the deal is that it's just super fun, right? So if I'm a third grader and, I'm like, I'm not doing that. But like all the other third grade friends that I have are like, this is awesome. This is amazing. Then pretty soon I'm going to be like, all right, fine, I'll go. And then, you know what I mean? And then you go and you're hearing scripture. So it's really cool. I think another important thing to mention is that students are not missing anything important at their schools when they're doing this, that schools do want to offer character education. So so students whose parents would not give permission, they're not missing anything. They can stay back at the school and they can get, just a different secular character-based education. So I think that's important to understand. But I will say that the excitement that's generated in the communities from the kids, but also from the families, is so big that everyone kind of really wants to be a part of it. So, 800 kids.
I think for the students too, just to have the mental break of getting on a bus and going into a different building, the whole shebang is about 40 minutes of their day. So for them to get on a bus and go to a different classroom with a different teacher and learn these character-based lessons, I think it gives them a little bit just of that kind of reprieve in their day, because I have a kindergartner, and kindergarten now is not what kindergarten was 10 years ago or 10 years before that. I mean, they're reading and they're learning a lot more. Whereas when I was in kindergarten, it was like color in the lines and let's go play. And
I'm still doing that.
So now we're asking a lot more of them. And I think that this kind of gives the kids, and probably the teachers too, a little bit of a mental break. Whereas there are days that my kids have 3 recesses, and recess is so important, but 3 seems excessive. But I also know they need those breaks. So this is kind of another opportunity for them to have a break from the standard, just sitting at the same table, at the same desk, and doing worksheets. And, not that that's what they do all day. They do lots of great things, but it just gives them that shift in their day that kind of is refreshing, I think, mentally refreshing.
And man, that number from Defiance is insane, number one. Number two, I just think putting that even in our own context, I would venture to say that every church combined in Bryan is not even remotely reaching that amount of kids, even if you include the VBS programs during the summer. I mean, That is an incredible opportunity to reach kids, and not just kids, but families with the gospel.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Niki.
I was going to say that's so important because as the kids go through this and they go home and they talk about their day, when they start telling their parents, what they did and what they learned, then their parents are also getting a little bit of that as well. So the outreach is huge. I
know for me, I saw that all the time in student ministry, working with 6th through 12th graders. On a Sunday, most of the time the kids don't have a choice whether or not they're coming to church. Maybe they do if they nag their parents enough. But for the most part, students are choosing. The vast majority of students are choosing whether or not they want to be there. They might still have to have someone drop them off. But it blew me away over the years in student ministry how many students would start showing up on Wednesday, get really connected, especially with their life group, and then start coming on Sunday, just the student. And then a few months later, mom or dad would start showing up. Dozens and dozens of families that have started coming just because of their child. And I'm just excited personally for what it's going to mean for our families here in our community. They're going to be like, man, my kid can't stop talking about this. My child's now like, I could do more on Sunday. I could hear more about this and what it really could mean for the gospel moving forward for our community.
That's important because as when I was a child, I did not grow up in the church. And so I used to almost get, I don't want to say jealous, but yeah, kind of jealous when I would hear my friends talk about catechism or Sunday school and different things. And I was like, man, I really want to do that. And so I actually started spending the night with friends who I knew would take me to church on Sunday. So on Saturday nights, I was staying with them. So I think we really have this big hunger and thirst to be a part of it and to understand it and to understand who we are, through the eyes of God. And so I kind of schemed my way into the church. And if there are any other kids like me, then this gives them that opportunity right during their school day where they can be fed in that way.
I love that. You're like the anti-rebel.
I didn't run away from the church. I was like, hey, can I spend the night at your house? And yeah, come on over. And not Friday, though, Saturday. Can I spend the night at your house Saturday?
That is awesome. Well, let me ask this. Where is Bryan's Lifewise program right now? Because it's, the end of the school year. We're getting ready to go into summer. Where is Bryan's Lifewise Academy program currently at? And what does the future look like kind of moving forward?
So Lifewise has lots of different levels, and we are officially described as near launch right now, which means we are just about to launch into fundraising, and our goal is to start up in August.
Okay.
So, we're so glad to be on this podcast so that we can start getting the word out. We really need people to sign up. There's a community interest list that actually, if you just go to Facebook, for those of you who are on Facebook, you can go to Lifewise Bryan or Lifewise Academy Bryan, look that up, and there's a link right there that you can just click on it and then kind of scroll down, and I don't think it's actually called community interest list, is it? Or get involved.
Says get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll put any links that we'll link Facebook, we'll link anything that we need to link to will just be in the description. Yeah. So feel free to just click that link as well and you can find your way there.
So obviously we are beginning fundraising. So we would love to have you sign up for the interest list so that you can get more information, not only about fundraising, but just about all of the exciting ways that you can get involved, which kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier. Like this, there are no pastors involved, and there are no pastors on our board. There is no official church affiliation. It literally is believers in our communities or in our community in Bryan who want to reach out to this mission field in our own backyard. So to me, that's super exciting. And I know that for many pastors, they're like, oh, well, you're not tapping in. I don't have to come to 100 meetings. No, it's okay. You guys have fed. You have poured into us so that we can go out and share the gospel with other people. So that's super exciting. So anyway, yes, sign up for the link so that we can get you newsletters and that kind of thing. But also we're sort of in the throes of looking for, we do have a bus. We've purchased a bus. We are looking for bus drivers.
You have to have a CDL for that, so that's tricky. Yeah. We're also, our needs involve obtaining 2 part-time teachers. Those are going to be salaried positions, so they are going to be paid for that. We're also looking for a volunteer coordinator because we're trying to assess like the full needs, but we anticipate having a couple of people in each class that help get students on and off the bus. And there'll be opportunities for volunteering through that. So it's important to note, like Lifewise Academy provides all the tools to launch and sustain your program, but as Rhonda said, it's like entirely community led.
Yeah.
So that's why that whole get connected thing is so important. It's not that we're going to spam your inbox with what's going on, but as the program moves forward, we have updates, and we're also going to have needs. And it's not always about, oh, they just want my money. It's not that either. We need your prayers. Maybe we need you to volunteer a couple hours every Tuesday. So there are going to be different needs, and that's just kind of our way of connecting to the community, because we are completely reliant upon the community to make this program happen. And it seems a little bit daunting at this time to think like, oof, we have a lot of work to do before we launch, and we do. But again, it's God's work. It's not ours. So I don't plan on failing, and I believe my God will not fail either. So the get connected piece of it is actually pretty important as far as just staying in communication with the community as to what's going on.
Awesome.
I just think it's really kind of cool to think about people in our churches who have raised money to go to, to go to Uganda, or to go in our church, the pastor and a team went to Malawi. I have some friends who are missionaries in Kenya. I mean, like, those are all amazing. We have someone in Czech Republic. Those are amazing and important. And of course we should be supporting them. That's one way to take the gospel out. But there are many people who that's maybe not within their grasp. They just don't have it in them to want to go to Malawi or to any of those other places, and have not felt led. I shouldn't say it's not in them, because really, truly, it's in all of us, right? But have not perhaps felt led. But I just want everyone to see this is no less important, and equally as important, because it truly is a mission field right here in our backyard, just like there are mission fields all over the world. And this is extremely accessible to everyone in our community who wants to see the gospel go forth in Bryan, Ohio.
Yeah. Well said. I completely agree with all of that. Sometimes we're just looking for the right opportunity to serve too. And this is really tangible to, maybe you're newly retired and you have a little bit of time, and, well, what am I going to do? I could help out in the classroom for a couple hours a week. And so everybody's, has different gifts that they can bring to the table here. So again, just getting connected with the community in that capacity so that we can bring forth those needs and people can serve how they feel led. So
I wanted to ask them for clarification and just, maybe looking farther into the future than we're looking right now. But is this an elementary only thing? And what do you guys see for junior high school? Is that anything that could potentially be on the radar in the future?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I was sitting here thinking, how can I weave that in? It's going to be so, because I think it's super exciting. Right now, we're going to start with grades 1 through 5, because you start small and you start with what you can do. We want to get all of our logistic ducks in a row.
Yep.
But the curriculum actually goes all the way up through high school. And what I've been told is that high school students can actually really dig down deep and can earn credits, I think, at some point, like some elective credits. Which is super cool. But for all intents and purposes, now we're starting with grades 1 through 5, and hopefully we'll be able to add all the way up through.
I just wanted to clarify, because if I'm a parent hearing about this for the first time, I might be a little confused. So really specifically, what does this look like for my child during the week?
That's a great question. And I asked the same question because I will have children in this program. we're actually working with the schools. The schools are going to designate the time slots, and we're coordinating the schedules. We have a representative of Lifewise that's coordinating all of the schedules. So what would happen if you wanted your child to participate, you would have to submit a form saying that they're allowed to participate. And then they would get picked up on the bus at Bryan Elementary.
Okay.
And then would get bused to a nearby church, which has graciously given us the space to have our classroom. And they will go in there and have their Lifewise curriculum, and it'll last, we anticipate about 35 minutes. The fun thing is that in Defiance, my friend is the teacher there now, and their church that they are working with is a little bit farther away, so they have a little bit of a bus ride. So she actually gets on the bus afterwards and finishes the lesson on the bus as they ride back to the school.
Yeah. Sounds like her.
You do what you got to do, right?
Yes, exactly.
Not wasting 1 minute.
Exactly. So it's very efficient. So, and then when they're done with that, they'll get back on the bus, and the bus will bring them back to Bryan, and they will go back to class and go about their day.
And is that a daily class, or how many times a week do they?
This will be once a week.
Once a
for each
week.
child.
Okay.
So the entire, obviously working in all the classes.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It will be an all day, all week operation.
So it'd be like a Monday would have one first grade class, one second grade class, one third. So a bus driver would be zipping back and forth like I guess 10
shuttling.
times. They're back, they're back, they're back. But so that by the end of the week, all first graders will have.
So
gone
on
through the
Tuesday,
program.
it's the second group of first grade, and then
Yes.
second group of, okay,
And
gotcha.
then on Wednesday, it would be the third group of first grade, and then so forth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
And this has been already approved by the Bryan City School Board.
Yep.
So they are fully on board with it.
Awesome.
But that's a great question.
So the three criteria is has to be, it can't be funded by the school.
Correct.
Has to be off property.
Correct.
And it has to be given with parents' permission.
Parent consent.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And again, if it's my understanding that this is kind of an influx thing. So if you get, we get 8 weeks into the school year and your child wasn't initially in the program and you want them to be a part of it, you can sign the permission slip and they can start going. Because we hope that actually happens as some kids start going and they come back and they had so much fun, and we anticipate other kids will want to be a part of that too.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about this at some point, or I heard it from maybe one of the other board members at some point, that there were kids that were giving up their recess to sign up for the class and convincing other kids to give up their recess for the class. So I just thought, what kid in the world is giving up their recess? But that's the power of the gospel, right?
Right.
It is.
It is attractive. The gospel is attractive. Like you were talking about as a kid, you wanted, you were missing out on something.
What is this? Yeah, I want to know about this. I want to hear about this. And I think I always say this. I've seen it with young children. I've seen it with junior high children. I've seen it with high school children, that there really is like an inherent thirst that they have to understand who God is and who they are in God's eyes. And sometimes we kind of dismiss their need for that. But it is there. I've seen it in all age levels. And I think it's our responsibility to at least introduce them to that and teach them what that means.
Man, and just as you say that, I think I'm just reminded that, we're created in whose image? In God's image. And if our identity doesn't come from the personhood of God, it's coming from a lie. It's coming from brokenness.
Right.
And I think, kids have not fully experienced all the lies that the world has to offer them about where and who their identity should be in. And so I feel like a lot of times kids accept that and it makes sense for them. And it's a beautiful thing. So I'm just over the moon excited about Lifewise Academy and what it's going to mean for the gospel moving forward with kids in our community, with families in our community. And I'm excited just as we move forward, and I would encourage you, if you're listening and you are the church, just asking yourself, what does it look like for us to either partner with Lifewise Academy or be really thoughtful, knowing that, very soon here in the near future, there may be families and kids showing up to your programs that you've never seen before. And there's a reality that we may need to be prepared to love on kids and love on families that don't look like us and don't talk like us. And it's, again, I've said the word excited about 42 too many times.
Well, where is Lifewise and Bryan right now? We have started the fire, and now we need to fan the flame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Anything else before we kind of end here?
I don't think so. Just go to Facebook, click on that link, join our mailing list. When you click on the link, there is a place to donate. You can donate if God is already moving you toward that. That would be fantastic and amazing. If you don't like to donate like on electronic things, like if you're old like I am, you can. There's a PO box that is listed on there as well. That's right here in Bryan. So yeah, we're just super excited, and we hope lots of people, true believers, will want to take on this mission with us.
Awesome. So just a reminder, check out Facebook, join the mailing list, all the links and contact, and we'll even put the P.O. box for donations in the description as well. But I know, as a member of Bryan, as someone who is very not excited about living in Ohio, but also I really love the community that I'm in. I love raising my family here. I'm really excited for what's to come and how this is going to impact us moving forward. So thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. It's been like a dream getting to hang out with all of you ladies. And thank you for joining us for this special podcast episode. And I just encourage you, if you're watching, if you're listening, get involved, join the mailing list, check out how God might be asking you to further the gospel in our community. And like we've kind of talked about all day today, be sensitive to what God is calling you to and be obedient to that call. Whether it's having a conversation with a neighbor, talking to some random guy in a bar. Ladies, I just discourage you from doing that, or getting involved with whatever God's calling you to in your own backyard, like Lifewise Academy. So thanks, guys. Have an awesome week, and see you soon.